rise alondo. When the shadows descend upon the lands, our divine Lord will walk alongside us as he walks. So saith the great Alando. No word shall walk the earth, and such a pestilence will follow in his wake that all who know of his passing shall be struck down by the plague.
Welcome back to Mages and Murderdads, the best show dedicated to the games beyond Baldur's Gate. This is episode 55, and we're playing Torment, Tides of Numenera. I'm Cameron.
And I'm Danny, and I play Balthazar.
Yeah, because we just to jump right into it, right? We said a little bit about it last episode. This is our second episode in Tides of Numenera, playing that game. And last episode, we said a little bit about our character builds. Briefly. I have stacked basically intelligence, the equivalent of intelligence. You have stacked
Might.
people up. Might.
Might, and I think the only non-combat skill I have is Intimidate.
Intimidate, not a combat skill, I guess. Does
Yeah.
does it come off of Might though? Is that the one that you use to power it
I believe so.
when it comes up? It probably doesn't come up all that often. None of those extra skills come up too much.
It's interesting, it did come up for me this session.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So in this episode, in case you're playing along, so we did basically, well, we played up to when you find a special someone. And we'll talk about who that is. But we basically played the Sage's Cliffs region, and then the Underbelly region. This episode, or not this episode, but this season / this game is a little bit weirder to plot out for us, because there's not, I mean, I guess there are chapters to this game, but they're big, and so you can't go chapter by chapter. There's not really like big transition points, of like jumping from universe to universe or whatever. So it's kind of arbitrary when we decide to stop, I think.
I've got to say, I think this whole game has been a real transition for me personally. I've found it quite difficult to get into this game, to get in the right headspace to like work this game. It feels very different from anything that we've played before. And
Why is that?
I'll tell you why. It's these stat pools. It
Okay.
changes the way in which you... It's like managing that resource really changes the way you interact with the game.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get into this more, but so at the end of last episode, you went further than I did because I did not get in a fight or like interact with those people who were like trying to figure out what the deal was.
Oh, yes. So just remind people in case it's been, because we took a week off.
That's right. So the last episode, kind of the end of what happened, we go through this tutorial where we create our character more or less, and we slam the hell into the world, right?
Yeah.
And it turns out we were in our little resonance chamber, and we got to fix that resonance chamber. We don't really know what we are, but there are these two figures whose names escape me now. You remember those two folks?
Callistiga, who is in my party now, and the other person.
Yeah. And the other guy. And so they kind of like don't really get along, but they join you, and when you leave, and I thought, oh, when I meet these two people, that's my cue to stop. But when you leave that area and you like progress towards the Sage's Cliffs, there are these kind of three kind of thievery, nefarious type bulks.
Yeah.
And they're trying to intercept you. And so I just said, I'm going to murder you. Like, that's how I responded to that.
Because they see, they like saw a falling star.
Exactly.
And so they're coming to see what's up. Is this technology? A moon blew up, so that might be important. All that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's all kinds of ways the conversation can go.
And I think when you did it, how did you interact with them?
I kind of like tricked them, or no, I lied. I was like, I saw the fallen star fall over there.
So at that point, a crisis is initiated. And this is my first exposure to like how this works. Which, have you been in a crisis yet? You probably were in like one crisis during this session, right?
Yeah. There are a couple opportunities for it to happen, and I remembered where one was, and I avoided it. Just because, like, I remember parts of this game from when I played it before. But yeah, certainly when we get, not to spoil anything, I don't know why we would be concerned about spoilers, I guess, for this episode that you're listening to. But yeah, when we get later to, like, the tomb of the changing god or whatever it was called, that I had a crisis there. Okay,
so basically what a crisis is it's an old school, like, D&D style. Or, like, if you're familiar with, like, if you've ever played the Temple of Elemental Evil, which used, like, the 3.5 third edition engine, initiative. So everything is turn-based, right? So there's kind of a track along the top of the screen about whose turn it is to go, and when it's a character's turn, they can move and do an action, right? And it's just straight-up combat like that, not grid-based, because it's kind of in this two-dimensional plane that allows you to go any number of vectors, but it's that. So it was a little disorienting. This is a huge first for us as far as mechanically, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I think we talked about it a little bit last episode, but yeah, this is an isometric game. And it carries the whole legacy of the isometric games we've been playing, right? I mean, it shares some of the writing staff, it shares some of the gameplay designers, all that kind of stuff. It shares the Pillars of Eternity engine, right, which is developed in order to emulate Baldur's Gate-style combat stuff, but this is not pause and play. This is 100% deterministic turn-based, which is interesting because, I think that a lot of combat encounter both frustration and excellency, for lack of a better term, that we've really embraced before had a lot to do with the pause and play kind of stuff. So like Balthazar during Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, just really abusing haste and things like that. To just completely wear down other enemies before... or not other enemies, but wear down enemies before they could do anything to him.
Because you got to remember, all of those things have to do with this concept called an action economy.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
An action economy. Now, you got to remember that Balthazar, circa Baldur's Gate 1, is a character that could have been made in 2nd edition, right?
Yes.
And that with effects and spells and, items that can cast spells, like haste and improved haste, what that did in 2nd edition was, it's Balthazar's turn, right? So there's still turns back then, but, Balthazar just gets 3 to 5 attacks, right? Yeah. And then now it's the ogre's turn, and the ogre gets 1 attack. And when you, extrapolate that onto a pseudo real-time engine, it's almost as if that haste and it's that action economy is even more warped because I can run away at any time, right?
Yeah. It becomes about turning partitions of a turn into sections of time, of real time. And that when you start interrupting that in any given way, right? Whether that's with item usage or whatever, that really does start messing with the way that action economy works.
Mm-hmm. And what we see now is almost, despite the fact that this game is one of the newest games we will play in this entire series, this is a return to the roots of how this actually works out on a tabletop. And given modern, and I'm just making an assumption here, but I guarantee you I'm right, given kind of modern design sensibilities, this is going to be infinitely more difficult to break, right? They are not, we know things about the action economy now. There's probably no spell that gives, you get 5 actions this turn.
Yeah, I think there's way less of that, for sure, in order to discourage you from breaking it in that way.
Yeah.
I think there's some of that, but yeah, I mean, part of that too, just to give some context, and people who listen to all of, the previous Mages and Murderdads might be aware of this stuff, but, part of that, that kind of, give 5 extra actions, or 5 extra attacks in a turn, things like that, comes from the kind of mechanical excellence of the wizard over anyone else, right? In classic D&D. So, like, wizards are just more powerful, like, by their very nature of existing. And so when you add wizard stuff, like magic and magical items, to classes that, in the course of D&D had to compete with wizardry, like barbarians, you end up with this mix of, I don't know, like,
I'll remember that.
actions that make up for not being a wizard, and then actual wizard stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like a barbarian with improved haste on it is the best of 2 worlds. Mm-hmm. And that only comes into being in D&D because of this kind of legacy system. Tides of Numenera, by its very nature of not being a legacy D&D system, maybe starts trying to solve some of those problems, because it can.
Yeah, we have to, take into account not only a new video game, also a new video game based on a completely different role-playing system made by someone who has experience with D&D but decided to do their own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's a long way to say the crisis system in this game, which we have to talk about it at some point, is that it's this old school turn-based run around. So kind of my character, the last Castoff, but here forthwith referred to as Balthazar. Runs around, hits things, and has a mighty fine time. The other members of the party can do things like teleport or do fiddles, which I can't believe that's a real term in this game still.
Feddles.
Feddles. I think it's fiddle. I think it's the E is pronounced with a
Oh, that might be true, but spelled fiddles.
Did I get you mixed up?
Just to make sure that people aren't, thinking of a devil went down the Georgia situation.
But anyway, so they all end up dead, and that's how Balthazar. So one other important note before we actually move to the content of this episode, shortly after that, Callistiga and that other fellow have an argument. And I told them both to beat it.
Oh.
Get out of here. Balthazar's on his own.
Okay. Are you gonna try to Balthazar on his own this whole thing?
Sure.
Okay. Sounds good. You are missing out on some very cool NPCs, but I can fill you in.
Okay.
As we go. Even though I can't get them all, because you can only have 4, I think.
Oh, four in the party total?
I believe so. I think it's only 4, because my party at the end of this episode is me,
I'm ready.
Rin,
I've
Callistiga?
ran into Rin. Okay, Callistiga.
and someone else, but I don't remember who the other one is.
Okay.
Oh, well. But anyway, I'll look in a minute to figure it out. But yeah. Oh, and Matt Kenna, I think. Oh, no, it's not. It is, gosh, I'll figure out his name in just a second.
Okay.
But anyway, so, but how did you feel about the Fettle system? Or not Fettle system, but the crisis mode?
It's certainly... It is more time intensive than just swinging around with sticks. Even if you are successful on the first go, which I was, it's almost faster just to like do it the Baldur's Gate 1 style and just have to reload 2 times than it is to play out the full crisis. Yes. It is a more measured, like deliberate system, which I think fits with an overall aesthetic, which took me time to get used to in terms of these are, getting into a crisis is something inherently you should probably want to avoid.
Yeah.
They're dangerous.
It drags the pace of the game down to molasses.
Absolute, like, those little, I don't know, like the Werther original... like imagine those stored in like a very hot, like 1983 Cadillac in the sun, right? Just a giant piece of steel, just a big steel oven. And they're just like in the cup holder, and they've all ran together about that speed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I like within that system, I think the action economy is good in the sense of it is robust enough to allow for a lot of different things. Because it's basically just the like, D&D 4th edition thing.
Yeah.
So there's like minor action, major action, and then move. And then you can replace your move with doing additional stuff. Or you can double move and not have another action.
Yeah.
Very, like, simple and tried and true kind of stuff, but also incredibly, like, by itself, no matter what the action is you are taking, it is time-consuming just to run through everyone having that kind of set of operations.
Yes, and it was overwhelming to get into that thing, and I tried to kick those 2 people out of my party before the crisis initiated, but they did not let me. And then the crisis initiates, and like, a tooltip comes up and it's like, Callistiga has a power to warp as using her movement. She can teleport, and then after she teleports, she gets bonuses. And then, like, the other person's like, oh, he has to do, like, he activates his tattoos, and if you chain together certain actions, they're more powerful over time. And I was like, holy smokes, this is a lot.
It is. It's a lot of. It's a game that assumes, and I think, you know, I've reviewed several of these, like, or this game, and then
Pillars of Eternity
2. Yeah, and in both of those, it's like these are games that are built as nostalgia engines, right? They are trying to capture something that you enjoyed about Planescape Torment or Baldur's Gate, and they are really, really speaking to the people who are already enfranchised. Like, this game assumes that you care about really digging deep in these systems, and I care about it in the sense of I want to play the game, so I have to learn how to care about it. But this is not where I want to be spending my time and effort. It's like learning depth systems of tattoo combos.
No, I mean,
so
that's one of the reasons why I kick those people out of the party, because you know what Balthazar does? He goes up to attack somebody and spends all the might he can on swinging at them.
So say a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah, so we got into it a little bit. So I have these pools of stats, and almost all of my stats are in my might pool, right? And we're going to get a little bit into this. I feel like I have to talk about what your options are when you level up to, like, actually explain this. So imagine I've got a might pool of 7. So I can spend 7 points of might before I rest, before my might pool is depleted. And when I go to attack someone, it might say, oh, you've got a 50% chance of hitting somebody by, you know, spending only 1 might. But you can spend 3 might, and you're up to like 85 to 90%, and you do more damage.
And just to remind people, the 3 stats in this game are might, speed, and intellect.
Yes.
And so melee attacks, 99% of the time, it seems, are might.
Yes.
Psychic attacks or something like that, you know, in the way that you might in D&D, you roll a ranged touch attack. Hello. That might be like an intellect, and firing an arrow or shooting a gun or something would be speed. Just to orient people here.
Yeah, so there are 3 aspects of these pools that can be altered or changed or upgraded, right? One is the overall size. So like I said, I have a very large might pool at the beginning. I think it's like 7 total might just in that pool. The second is the threshold of how simple or complex an activity you're trying to accomplish that you can accomplish without spending anything, right? This is kind of like the D&D version of taking a 10.
Yeah,
right?
Raising the floor.
Raising the floor high enough so that you can just automatically do some things.
Yeah, so you would get a 60% chance to hit every time, no matter what.
And then the last one is how many on any given activity, how much of your pool can you spend? So I have 7 might, but the most I can ever spend on any one activity is 3. Of course. Right? So, yeah, there we are.
Ceiling.
Yeah, so that would be raising the ceiling of how much you can spend.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you could have 50 might, but if the only thing like it doesn't, that's not going to do you too much good. That's going to be like an endurance, a marathon thing. Whereas raising the ceiling of how much you can spend is the sprint, right?
Yeah.
So those are the aspects that can change. So right now, Balthazar, right after he left the resonance chamber area, like turned right, and there was this big writhing bush of like grabby hands. Mm-hmm. And I snapped one off, and now I have like a mace, a grab that's got a grabby hand that deals poison damage.
Okay.
And I just like hit the tar out of people with that. It's just like a real, like I picked up a greatsword, but actually it's interesting because weapons will have, oh, well, how much additional damage will this do if you spend, additional pips on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so in the case of a melee weapon, like, okay, for every might you spend, what's the maximum you can? And the grabby hand just has a way higher ceiling. So I'm just really swinging with the fences with my grabby hand.
Gotta get that grabby hand.
You absolutely, that's the number one thing they teach you in Balthazar School.
And so you can, when you level up, you can do those things to your stat pool, and then there's all kinds of like additional auxiliary things that you
like
can do.
Increasing skill pips.
Yeah, exactly. Or getting new skills. So, for example, you have like intimidation. And I think I talked about it last time, but I have read thoughts, which is just I straight up can read the thoughts of everyone I talk to.
Yes.
And it gives me like a sentence of what they're thinking and how they feel. So my party, just for people who are concerned, because we're not really going to talk about party members too much in this episode, because not a lot happens, but I have Callistica, Aretas, and Rin. And Aretas is one of the coolest NPCs in all of video games, I think.
Oh, wow.
He's very cool, but we'll talk about why later. But what was the first quest you did?
Yeah, so basically, I'm trying to figure out what the deal with this residence chamber is, and the only like lead I have after kicking those jokers out of my party is that there's this cult of the changing god around. At this point, I don't really know who or what I am. What's the most we know about who or what we are at this point?
I don't think you know. I mean, you know that you're a Castoff of the changing god.
Yes, I guess Callistica said that?
Yeah. Because that's what they do. They kind of study you. And they both have different ways of going about it.
But do you know what that means?
Not really. We kind of get that in the content of this episode.
Yeah, so I go into the Sage's Cliffs, and the first thing I see is somebody's like on a trial or like being punished. Did you see this?
I did see it. Did not investigate.
You didn't investigate that? That was
Didn't wanna find out.
Did you see that big old squid monster in the beaker, in like the big glass
like an
cage?
aboleth, basically.
Yeah. So I talked to some people, and I guess they're gonna like feed this person's thoughts to this thing. Mm-hmm. It seemed real bad.
Yeah.
But eventually, I walk over to this giant clock. Mm-hmm. This is the cult of the changing god, and they're like, hey, my clock's broke. Did you help them fix their clock?
Yeah, I did help them fix their clock. Because, I mean, they're concerned about the clock because the changing god made it.
Sure.
And
And
like, I
there's
want
a
that
big
clock.
discussion about, like, they immediately recognize you as a Castoff. And there's a point where you can lie and say, oh, I'm definitely the changing god, y'all. Or actually, I don't even...
Did you try that?
Let's go.
In one load, so like I had to reload because of something, and I did say that. And the reason why I said that is it didn't even have like in parentheses lie next to it, right? It just said, "Oh, I am the changing god," and I was like, "Oh, is this like a Dungeon World-esque? Like we're making our own situation here, right? Maybe I just am the god."
Oh, I see. That by making that statement, you make it true.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that happens.
Spout lore, yo. But no, that did not work out. If you do say that, you're going to, when you do the next step of the quest, one of the guys will be like, oh, you definitely were lying, because, it wouldn't work this way if you were the changing god. Anyway, the other option is I am the most recent Castoff. So the last Castoff means it's last in that I don't necessarily know at this point that we know that we are the final Castoff, but we know that we are the most recent Castoff. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think we are the most recent Castoff.
Yeah.
I think that's factual.
So there's kind of a little puzzle you can do where you're trying to fix this clock. They kind of tell you, hey, we'll help you, but you got to fix this clock first. And you got to go to each one of these nodes attached to the clock and basically like lock in a memory a la the tutorial. You see these like memories of things that have happened. And if you like associate a memory with each of the nodes, you kind of kickstart the clock. And then I went over to the clock and it was still like acting up, so I just smashed it. So I just smashed the tar out of it, and then darkness fell upon the world.
Oh, okay. I didn't do that. I didn't smash the clock.
Yeah, I smashed it. It was like the Fawns.
And it just made it work again?
Well, I don't know if it made it work, but like the darkness fell upon Sage's Cliffs.
Yeah, like so did you get a sense of like what... So each one of those nodes is like a different moment in time.
Yes. So
in this location.
And the issue, like the reason why this clock is quote unquote broken is because it is scattered in time.
Yes.
It is not all in one place. It's not synced up. So it's kind of like, oh, maybe it's phasing in and out over here, or not over here, like when here, right?
Yeah.
Then there. And we got to like resync it up. So I just smashed the tar out of it and got it synced back up. Took my grabby hand stick and pulled it back to the present.
Well, what happened when you did that?
So yeah, so there's this little dialogue about how it's almost as if the sun set instantly, but strangely light was still emanating or like reflecting off of things. And then the two representatives of the cult of the changing god said, "Oh man, that's kind of." I think one of them said that's pretty. Discomforting, basically. They were like, I don't know if we like that, but I guess if that's got to happen, it's got to happen. But they said, oh, it's still not fixed. And you've got to, and basically I have to go up and touch it and like to initiate the next part of this problem. How did you fix it if you didn't smash it?
I just oriented all those things in time. So I just went to each of the nodes, and each one has like a feeling associated with it, and then there's like a story, and I just align those stories with those feelings.
Oh, maybe I didn't align them correctly. Maybe I just like randomly associated, and then when it didn't work, I smashed it.
No. Yeah, you gotta... And if you talk to people around, so if you talk to the Cult of the Changing God a little bit, and you remember those memories that you went through during the tutorial... And if you talk to this other character called the Genocide, which we'll talk about in just a minute.
Oh my god.
If you talk to all of them, it gives you a sense of like what kind of things were happening in the times that the stories are about, and you can associate them correctly. I did it wrong the first time, and it like all turned off again, very Planescape Tormenty, and so I reconfigured it. And
okay.
And so, yeah, and then I got, like, sucked into my own brain. Did this happen to you?
Yes. So after I smashed it and I went up and touched it, after it was kind of all synced back, basically Planescape, Torment, circa, I don't know, probably three-fourths of the way through. Remember when we got sucked into like a pocket plane with three of our former selves?
Yeah, that was literally in the last 10 minutes of the game.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Well,
there was also a section where we got like trapped. There was a trap. I don't think that you played that, but that was in the hotel.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't think I did that.
But yeah, so very reminiscent. We get zapped into a place. You can tell it's kind of in our head because it's got the same aesthetic of the tutorial, and there are three other, what we find to be, Castoffs there.
Are they Castoffs?
I believe so.
At least one of them is a Castoff. But yeah, so these are people that when this clock was made... I really like this storytelling. So when the clock was made, and when the Changing God made it, he was a nano, like a very powerful nano, which is like a wizard in this world. And so he makes this clock in order to fight off the invaders who were invading the city, Sage's Cliffs.
I believe the Genocide was a member of them.
Yeah, so we get the other side of the story from him, and depending on when you talk to him. But while that's happening, there are basically people who don't believe. They believe in the Changing God, but like not enough. They're adherents who go to betray him. And
They just thought his time was up, basically. They thought maybe they could do a better job of leading.
Yeah, exactly. And he, like Jesus style, cast them into a clock. And then decoupled that clock from time.
Yeah, it's rad as hell.
It is rad as hell.
So when we touch the clock after it's been resynced, they don't come back. They just get zapped into our brain.
Yes.
And they are all Castoffs, because there is another portion where you can ask later about what the deal with them was. And they were like, oh, they were once all loyal servants, as Castoffs. And they betrayed, their originator. Right? Which we're slowly, piece by morsel, understanding our own metaphysics and ontology as a Castoff, right?
Yeah, there's a real... I mean, you can see how... I think I alluded to this last time, or maybe at the end of the Planescape Torment last video, but there's a way that this game keeps the kind of storytelling that Planescape Torment does and solves the problem of Planescape Torment.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Meaning that all of these big important people are you, but it's not you. Does that make sense?
I understand. So the problem you're pointing to with Planescape Torment is the fact that there is this entity, the Nameless One, this one individual that cannot die, and you'll be running around the world, and people will be like, oh, snap, you were totally here however long ago, and you were this major figure in this area. Whereas this, we are... Yeah, it is the same force, but not necessarily the same specific entity, because we're all it's very like reincarnate-y, right?
100%,
like we are reincarnations, or we are these cast off vestiges of this changing god. So there's way less intentionality and kind of accountability given to each individual Castoff, because it's kind of understood, oh yeah, you were just the face it wore for a while.
Exactly. And so like it gets rid of these questions of like, well, if I'm the person who did all of this stuff, then why does no one recognize me? Or why does no one know it's me? Or why are there no images of me? Or the other side, everyone knows who I am and they're all lying to me. Mm-hmm. Right? Which is like, say the way that Farad's story kind of plays out in Planescape Torment. Yeah. In this, it's like, oh, you've got a big tattoo on your face. You're probably a Castoff. You might not be. That's an open question. We can talk about it. It might not be on your face every time. Or you might be someone who's pretending to be a Castoff for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's more of like you are a part of a big structure rather than an individual who does stuff. It just seems to like even a lot of things out for me.
Yeah. No, I get that, definitely. But I do really like the... it's a slow drip. It's a real Mr. Coffee situation in terms of the revelation, not the revelation, that implies like a big event, but just like the slow filling in of what we are. And it makes me really attentive to the dialogue, right? Because I feel like as a player that I wanna figure this thing out that it feels like everybody else in the game knows.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, in my game, I was just like, yeah, I guess you're stuck in my brain now. And and literally one of them was like, well, we've been stuck in that clock for forever, so
yeah,
it's totally cool.
But in order to get out, I've got to find the answer within me that was there all along.
What can change the nature of a man?
So basically, we run through. They're like, yeah, the only way for you to get out is you must find something innate within you. And then channel that in order to like create some kind of portal out of here. And I give a few examples, and they're like, "Well, that's not really innate about you. The changing god could have, that could have been a choice, or maybe you did that because of your innate thing." And they give me three options, and I'm not 100% satisfied with the three options they gave. I'm sure that the three options point to ways in which you're supposed to play this game. Mm-hmm. But they didn't mesh well. The first was stealth. There was like stealthiness, tankiness, and talkiness. Mm-hmm. Those are the three. What did you choose?
I probably chose talkiness. I don't exactly remember this choice, but I probably chose talkiness. And this isn't a thing you have to sacrifice, right? This is just like a way of bringing something out from within yourself.
Yeah, you had to choose one of these, and there was a little screen that came up, and you chose one of the three, and it showed you what like abilities you would get when you chose this.
That's right. I've definitely chose talkiness.
So yeah, I was thinking about the tankiness, but the thing is, the tankiness is like super defensive. I also chose talkiness because that actually is relevant for my intimidation skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're both that, at least. And also I just foresee, especially given my experiences with the combat, it would be nice for me to have like a way to not do that every time if it's like character appropriate.
Yeah, to still be in character and yet not having to fight everyone with your mace. Yeah, so you do this and you come out. It's very funny too because you're like inside person, your hologram brain person that you talk to. It's just
Deckard Cain. It's really like your own Deckard Cain. Everyone has a little homunculus inside their brain that if they ever get zapped into their brain, that's just a little Deckard Cain in a robe.
Yeah. And I just love that you talked to him. You're like, how do you get out? And he was like, well, probably the same way you got out before. I don't know. Figure it out. I'm not
you can talk to him sometimes, and you'll be like, what's new around here? He's like, it's your brain, dude. I don't know. Look around.
Yeah, it's all you. But yeah, I think I know from playing this before that this like inside brain space fills out even more. More entities end up in here, and so I'm curious about going back and talking to, say, those betrayers and seeing what they have to say later in the game, which I don't think I did the first time I played. But after this whole thing, you come out, and the Cult of the Changing God is so happy that you did this that they tell you about another Castoff that might help you fix the resonance chamber. And her name is Matkina. She's the White Death, I think.
The White Death, kind of an assassin.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the big payoff for this section of the game, is trying to figure out how to find Matkina, which isn't super hard, but then getting there, which is super hard.
Yeah.
So before we talk about that, there's like this is the Sage's Cliffs region, and there's like two other big storyline things that happen here. The first being the genocide. So let's talk about that really quick.
Very cool dude who speaks, and there's like a big echoey voice and like a giant helmet. And when you first talk to him, he kind of mentions, I'm required to answer all your questions. So I talked to him a while, and he's basically just frozen here. Yeah. And his punishment that was inflicted on him by the Changing God is that he must just chill out here. He is the member of a failed invasion, like an invading force attempted to come here, and he was captured. And he has to basically be a sentient, like, memorial that answers questions about this stuff, and chills out.
Yeah, and so it's related to the clock. So at some point, so the genocide is part of this group called the Black Three, and I didn't write down the other two names, but they're basically this like interplanetary / planar. It's kind of unclear, like metaphysical attack force.
And they saw the Earth one day, and they're like, we got to get in on that.
They do, and they have these dead gods that they worship. Who like still communicate with them somehow.
The Underspine.
Yeah.
Did you read what he said when you like asked about what is the Underspine?
I do, but I don't remember this.
Oh my god, it's so good. I played this yesterday, and it was like, oh, it was so good. It's like the Underspine is stone. The Underspine is death. It's just like a list of these things that are all like contradictory. But the one way to interpret it is that the Underspine could just be like a code of conduct that they all like swear fealty to, which is basically, when you like get down to it, just pure will to power.
Yes,
like
100%.
They are pure interplanar like fascists. The only truth that exists is that which percolates to reality through conquest.
Yes. And so, yeah, he gives you this whole big, like, structure of how that works. But, yeah, the Changing God defeats the siege by the Black Three with the clock. And the way he does it is that while the siege is happening, from the underspine, right, from these three big generals, the Black Three, they have logistics lines that are coming from, you know, their previous conquests or whatever. And so the Changing God breaks the city in time in order to break the lines of logistics and supply. And so by unhinging the genocide from time, there's no way they can be reinforced. And so, and the implication being that by doing that, the Changing God changes the conditions of if a siege could happen or not. And that happens again later in this episode.
Well, yeah, like causality gets broken,
Exactly.
right? Like there were certain, and we kind of end the episode on a little mention of this, but there were certain preconditions that had to be met to even start the siege. And when you fiddle with the past, right, you ruin time in a way that makes the siege impossible.
Yes. And this is the kind of very, because this is a Monty Cook story, or setting, right? This is a very, like, Monty Cook kind of thing, right? Where it's like, there might be some explanation of how this works, and I'm sure in the source books there is, like, an exacting explanation of how this works, but basically this is just, like, just go with it. Like, this is some, like, edge of human thought, conceptual weirdness that you should just accept and get on with your life.
But all of this being said, that's not even my favorite part about the genocide. My favorite part is he has kind of like come around and he's like, actually, I'm winning. Did you talk to him about that?
I did not.
So he's like, of the Black Three, he was foretold by this kind of prophet in his culture that he would kind of like, he would exist until there was nothing to conquer in the universe. And he is going to be stuck here until the end of time, which means, and this is what he tells himself, he is going to see the end of humanity. Like, he will see the end of Earth. So he has, like, he's perfectly happy with this situation because he's like, yeah, I'm going to win. I'm the genocide. I will be here until it's over.
That's cool. That's cool writing.
It's good, right? Like, this is when, and there was a lot of disorientation when I first started this game, and I was like, oh my god, it's so big. You can go to like 5 areas immediately, right? You kind of are flung into like Baldur's Gate itself here with the city. And when I like actually settled down, I was like, okay, I'm going to start talking to people in this first area, and I talked to the genocide. I was like, ooh, this is good. This is like very, it's like lighten up the parts of my brain that really enjoyed the Planescape Torment characters and dialogue.
Yes. And so the other big story here, well, there's one like micro story. Did you talk to Jerem and all that stuff?
I did not talk to Jerem.
So we'll save Jerem because it's part of a longer quest, and this is just the beginning. But just to say that Jerem is a child from a different part of time who was like in extreme poverty, and his parents, in order to save his life, to keep him from, dying of starvation, just made him a time orphan. And he tells you the whole story about it. He's the child who's like running around and playing. But I think there's more to that, so we'll do the whole quest and then we'll talk about it later. But the other major one is Tol Magwar. Magar? I don't know how you say her name.
Sure.
But she is a slaver.
Bad.
Well, what does Balthazar think about slavery?
Balthazar's against slavery. Because you know what Balthazar's against?
Updated my journal.
I don't know. Probably has something to do with being told what to do.
Yeah, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like people telling people, specifically Balthazar, what to do. So that's like basically that slavery is just a very complicated version of that, or simple.
I think it's the simplest.
It's the simplest form of being told what to do. So. No, I never even ran into Tol Magwar. I did run into 2 slavers at the edge of the map whose name was Slavers. I could not figure out how to attack them.
Wait, so you didn't do any of the Tol Magwar quest?
No, I didn't see Tol Magwar, but I did find the person that Tol Magwar was looking for.
Oh, so you did that first?
Yes.
Whoa, weird. Okay, so if you talk to Tol Magwar, she basically says, look, I'm a slaver. But slavery is a punishment. Like, it is accepted because one is not, like, born into slavery. One is punished to slavery.
Real
which is
13th
like,
Amendment stuff here.
Yeah, it's like a real screwed up modus justification. So she says, I'm looking for my ward, Rin, who's like a child. And she's like, if you tell me where Rin is, I'll like show you how to do some Castoff stuff, because I know Castoff stuff because I'm a Castoff. But don't tell anybody about it. Don't tell nobody that I'm a Castoff. And I was like, all right, well, I'll find Rin. Whatever. I'll go do that. So you run around and you're doing other quests or whatever, and eventually you can find Rin. You can talk to people and find Rin or whatever, or you can just go to this abandoned house in Cliffside.
Yeah, I was just around Cliffside, and I was just, like, clicking on things. Sometimes it would be like, oh, there's some rubble, and I would be like, oh, use my might to move it, and I'd spend some might, move the rubble, right? Maybe get some experience, maybe get some shins, which is the currency.
So tell me about finding Rin, then.
Yeah, so I clicked on this one thing, and I was like, oh, there's this hole here, and there's this little person in there, this little kid, and they're super scared. And I said, hey, what's going on in here? And as I've got my head in the hole, like looking at this person scurrying around, these 3 people show up, and their names, from their names, I know that they're slavers, and they're like, hey, we finally found this girl. Hey, you. Get out of our way, because we're gonna take this girl. And the girl's like, I don't want to go with them. And I say, you guys need to get the hell out of here. Right? That's what I said.
Well, did they?
Well, this is where some interesting stuff happened. The first thing is I could do like an intimidate check. Right? So I spent some pips, right? And there's like an 80% chance I could intimidate these people. And it didn't work.
Oh, damn.
It was like, burr, 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 burr. And yeah, and they were like, ha, you don't scare us. And then they started to step forward. And then I could like say a different thing, right? After my intimidate failed, they offered me a new arrangement. They said, hey, how about this? How about, I know that, you don't care about this girl, right? So how about we just give you like 30 shins and you just walk away, right?
Kind of a partial failure scenario.
Yeah, you just walk away, you don't have to deal with it. So I could like take the 30 shins, I could just walk away of my own accord. I could do like the very noble thing and say, no, you're not gonna take her. I could also, there's like a lot of options, and I could also just be like a little bit meaner. And then the final option was, in brackets, reach out, snap his neck.
Whoa!
And that was a speed check.
Not a strength check. It's just assuming that you have the hand strength.
I think, yeah, I can't remember, but it was one of those. So then I'm like, yes, hell yes, I do that. And that fails. He like easily dodges out of the way.
Damn.
And then the final one, I have one more chance. There's fewer options. And the final one is like, go to disarm his weapon. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'll do that. And I go to disarm his weapon, and he easily dodges me and just impales me on his sword. And just murders me. Like, just a straight-up instant death. Like, you failed 3 checks, you're murdered.
That's good.
So then I get zapped.
Good design.
I get zapped back to my head.
Yes.
And there's Deckard Cain there. He's like, yeah, you must have fucked up there, buddy. And he's like, and he shows me the door. He shows me the door, and I just get zapped right back into my dead body. And when I rise from the grave, from beyond the grave, all the slavers run away.
Yeah, I would too. Wouldn't you if you killed somebody?
If I killed somebody after they attempted to intimidate me, then attempted to snap my neck, then attempted to disarm me, and failed all of those things, and then I killed, and I'm like, this is the least competent ghoul ever, but eventually luck will be on their side, right?
Yes. Well, that's your introduction to like the how you keep the death system from Planescape Torment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm very happy with it. And then I like just, and then Riss like told me a little bit about herself, and I was like, well, good luck.
You told her to get the hell out?
No, I told her, hey, good luck.
Well, yeah, but did you, what, did she go away?
No, she's hanging out.
Is she in your party?
No.
You did. So you didn't finish this quest line.
Well, I didn't finish it because I didn't want her to tag along with me. It's dangerous.
We also didn't start it, I guess.
I didn't start it. That's right.
You have done the middle third of a quest line.
I guess so.
Okay. So all this same stuff happened for me. I didn't go through that whole thing. I think I just successfully intimidated them. And then I said, listen, we gotta you're being hunted. We've got to figure this out. So come back with me to Tol Maguire. I won't give you back, but we do need to figure it out, right? Because otherwise, these slavers are going to still be looking for you. And so we go back, and I'm ready to do a fight. I don't exactly remember how this works. And so I go back and I'm like, listen, I don't want to... I've got Rin with me, but she's not coming back. And then through conversation, we find out that Tol Maguire is a Castoff, which we knew already. Tol Maguire uses Rin, so Rin has some sort of psychic power to absorb tidal bursts. Have you experienced a tidal burst yet?
I don't. So, are those when I make certain decisions and they're like, "Oh, your red tide is increased"? Is this a different thing?
No. So that's like the tides, and it basically is like alignment.
Yes. Okay.
Like, what is the shape of this timeline that you are in, based on the choices that you're making? And so sometimes, based on conditions, whatever, you have these things that are like a tidal burst, which is like a shock of your cast-off energy. And you can focus that to do cool things. Okay? So, Tol Maguire has these, tidal bursts, and she can't control them. And so she has been using Rin as, a focusing prism to absorb her, psychic freakouts to zip it into Rin's body, which is, incredibly painful and violent to the child.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so you can kind of piece this together, and I was like, look, this is, this is bad. You can't do this. And Tol Maguire was like, look, this is very important. This is, the way that I control my problem. I'm going to have to take this kid back by force. And I was like, listen, if you try to do that, I'm going to go tell the Cult of the Changing God that you are a cast-off. And that's going to, screw with your whole deal.
Yeah, it's really going to ruin your enterprise.
Because they will not leave you alone. And the threat of that was so brutal that she was like, okay, fine. Sounds good. And then, importantly, she teaches me tidal focus.
Just out of the goodness of her heart?
Under the threat of me telling the changing cult. So I kind of push my luck. And so tidal focus is basically, it's the delve back into your memory of this game.
Oh, okay.
So it allows you to rethink things, or to go back into your changing God brain and pull things out. And I actually used it.
This is like your mind palace.
And so I used it in this episode to do something that I'm curious if how you did it.
Okay.
But, so that's kind of all the stuff that's in this region. There are a couple things that happen in another place we went to called the Underbelly. So number one, you can go in there and you can talk to a guy, and this is just pure plot. You can talk to someone called the Map Maker, who just knows maps. And he legit is like, hey, I know where Matkina is. If you want to find Matkina, you just got to tell me how to get to the Changing God's Sanctuary. Good luck!
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of people that we meet in here. Did you meet Varanoth?
I did not meet Varanoth. Who's Varanoth?
You got to talk to Varanoth later. We'll bring it up. Varanoth is one of the funniest. It's like the Genocide, right? It's like a character with a lot of... I mean, the Genocide's not funny, but it's a character with a lot of humor to it and interesting stuff.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it in another episode. Did you meet Folsom?
I'll remember that.
I did. That's how I got to the Map Maker, actually.
Okay.
I went to Folsom first. I was told, hey, I know Folsom is trying to solve this mystery... And that's how I got to the Matkina.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me about your Folsom quest, then.
Yeah, so Folsom is attempting to solve a series of murders. And one of the people he wants to talk to is Matkina, right? And this is a real classic Gygaxian area.
It is.
It's got a central conflict happening between like two factions. The Stitcha and kind of these fish people. What's the name of their species? They're like agendered fish people.
No, they're not fish people. They're like
Well, that's how they're referred to by the Stitcha, because they have scales. That might be.
Oh wait, so you're talking about the Stitcha?
Yeah, no, the Stitcha, and then the separate, like the three people who are acting on behalf of Sages.
Oh, that's right. They are like cephalopods. Like they're kind of elephants, right? That's kind of the feeling I got from it.
Maybe that's the so the Stitcha are like. So these are the two things kind of happening in this area, and I completely ignored the Foreman quest, right? No, or not Folsom, rather. I kind of ignore the Folsom quest, and like I'm like, Matt Keena's what I want. If I can solve the Folsom quest later, or like during this process, I'll try to do that. But the central conflict is this, like in the top northeastern part of the zone, the Stitcha are like these big old hulking, kind of like Umber Hulk type things that are electrical.
Yeah, they are Umber Hulks with the serial number filed off.
Yeah, and they're just digging away, and Sages is trying to stop them because they're digging in places they're not supposed to be. They're endangering the whole town. There's going to be a cave-in or something. So
like all these buildings that we saw in the rubble in Cliffside.
It is caused by, basically sinkholes.
That are being caused by the Stitcha digging too close to the city, basically.
So one of the representatives of Sages asks me, "Hey, can you help us out here?" And I say, "Sure." And you can go and talk to this one particular Stitcha, and it's like very rough, kind of sign languagey, but you can pull from your previous memories to figure out, because like, as a Castoff, I guess you have access to the collective memories of reincarnated versions of the Changing God.
Well, I think it's just
in a limited form
that the Changing God always has all of these memories, right? It's just you, like when you are dropped off, basically. When the Changing God leaves your body, it like resets your body into zero. Right, you just have a general feeling of who you are, and you have to kind of live your life for yourself. And we're going to meet a bunch of characters through the rest of the game that are dealing with that kind of existential problem. But yeah, I think the idea is that there's just like, of that big Changing God memory, there are all these like blueprints and impressions of memory that if you think real hard, you can summon up part of it.
Yeah, so I'm able to summon up how to speak Stitcha, and
I couldn't.
No? You couldn't? Oh, I got lucky.
I couldn't do it, and so that's why what I ended up using my Tidal Surge stuff for. Tidal Focus is that you can do it with that.
I see.
That's kind of the backup strat.
So you were able to like get the backup strat. I don't know what I would have done otherwise, but so I talked to them, and they're basically like, "Hey, there's this nice electricity in these rocks, and we got to eat. And I know that the people here are like upset because their houses are getting collapsed or whatever. But who told them to build their houses on our tasty rocks? That seems like a them problem." And you know what? When he says that, I was like, "You got a point, Stitcha. You got a point, Umber Hulk guy. Yeah, that's probably correct. Whatever." And I asked them. So I talked to the mapper, and the mapper told me, "Hey, I'll tell you where Matkina is, but you got to tell me how to, you need to be able to like describe to me this place called the Changing God Sanctuary, right?" So I asked the Stitcha, "Hey, would you please, take me to the Changing God Sanctuary?" And the Stitcha are like, "No, that is, privileged information. You got to have top secret clearance for that. Not even for money will I do that." So I just walk away. And the way I figure it out is there's actually a Stitcha corpse in the very southeast of the map that has been, so I use my might to like dig it out from the rubble. And I talked to a few people. I'm like, "Hey, I need to like dig," and the Stitcha aren't doing anything. And they're like, "Oh, you better like build a digging machine And because I've already been around the area of the Underbelly, there's kind of like a very Is-It-inspired Steamworks, steampunky area in the north west of the map. So I head up there, and there's a master foreman who is also kind of like stuck in time, immobile.
The Master Foreman is one of the best characters in any of these games.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and actually, I feel like I missed out. The first thing he yells at you is to get to work. If you get to work, if you, like, start doing labor after he does that, you get 2 might pool.
Huh.
You just get +2. But anyway, I tell him, nobody tells me what to do, so I don't do that. And I say, hey, I need to make a digging machine, and we talk about it for a while. And he says, oh, you're going to have to pay me for all this, like, material necessary to build the digging machine. And I was like, well, what about this Stitcha corpse? And they just, like, rigged me an automated Stitcha. They, like, take the corpse, and it's just, like, half robot and just does what I say.
Did you talk to the Master Foreman about, like, his whole deal?
About his history? I know that he was, like, there for the siege, right?
Yes, so they've been there forever. Like, they've been down in here...
Forever?
Okay, so let me blow your mind.
Okay.
The impression that I got... You remember the story about digging the sanctuary? In your mind from the tutorial?
Very beginning, yeah. We were like, oh, this is a really good place. It's protected by all these glyphs and whatnot.
So when you talk through the Master
Oh my god, he was the guy?
Yes, so when you talk to the Master Foreman, he's like, our god put us here. And, I don't work anymore, but that's okay, because that's what our gods... if I were repaired, that would be going against what our creator wanted us to do. We've been here, we don't know why we're here. And if you remember in the tutorial, she is saying things about, the kind of choice you make in the tutorial is like to give them shielding or to give them a better mind or things like that. Mm-hmm. So you are, the Changing God was the creator of these robots that are just doing stuff in the Foundry now, but he originally created them to create the Sanctuary. Isn't that cool?
That's cool.
It's very cool. So you got an automatic robot.
Yeah, how did you do the digging? Did you convince
the Stitcha, whatever they're called.
How did you convince them?
So I talked to the government, and I talked to the Stitcha. I learned their language. I went up to Cliffside and talked. There's a wounded Stitcha up there. I talked to him. I figured out that he couldn't dig. His claws were malformed, so he couldn't dig, and so I brought him back all the way down. I got him rescued, basically. And then I think I just negotiated I don't remember the exact steps I took to do it, but I just negotiated a peace treaty, basically, between the Stritcha and the government. And I asked the Stritcha to just dig a little bit deeper, and they were like, okay. I was like, the government will leave you alone if you do that. And they're like, all right, fine. Sounds good.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get directly to the Changing God Sanctuary. I was only able to dig to the egg chamber. Yes. And then I had to sneak through the egg chamber to get to the Changing God Sanctuary.
I didn't, so basically my course of action got them to move just deeper underground, and so they evacuated the egg chamber. And so I got teleported to the very end of the egg chamber, and then I just walked through it.
Yeah, mine was an entire crisis situation. The entire stealth portion was in crisis.
Yes, that is the way. I remember having done it that way before, when I played this game before.
Boy, it takes a while.
It takes a long time to do it. Oh, I'm sneezing. I'm going to leave that in. Just so you know that we're human over here. But so we go down there, and this is just the tomb from
Planescape Torment.
Right? It's like a laboratory. There's some mirrors that you look in, and each mirror does a different thing.
One just straight murks you.
It didn't summon any gremlins or anything?
Well, one also summons gremlins.
But
another just straight up cuts your head off.
I got a bronze sphere out of one of them.
I got one of those too.
Back, but I didn't open it yet, so I don't know what's in it.
Ooh.
I got a bronze sphere. and some gremlins came out and attacked me, and I died, and it respawned me outside of this chamber, and I was like, I don't care about going back. So I didn't go back.
And one just teleports you to the clock.
Oh, that actually might be... I might have killed the gremlins and got teleported back to the clock.
Yeah, and but the big... There's also a very big... Did you see the mural in here?
I did, but I don't remember what it's of. What was the mural of?
It was deeply disturbing. It was of the... That's all I remember. It was like of the changing god, and it was kind of macabre.
Yeah, I imagine there's some storytelling in that bronze sphere, but we'll have to wait for another episode. But after that, I just went to the map maker, and I'm like, well, here it is. Good luck with those gremlins down there.
And then after that, he's like, yeah, I know where it is, but I don't know how to get there. But I just went to my little automatic digger, and they just dug me right to Makina.
I asked the Strika that was still there. I said, hey, can you take me to this location? And, I showed him the map, and he said, yeah, sure, whatever. So, similar strategy. Then we found Makina, and her whole deal is that she...
Well, her whole deal might need to wait till the next episode. I feel like I don't want to leave our audience with too many unanswered questions.
Okay. Well, we're going to start next episode with Makina's whole deal. The thing, because I guess the thing that she asked us to do does take a little while to walk through. So we'll start next episode with Makina. You can find us on twitter.com @RangeTouch. You can find us on Patreon. If you look down in the description below, if you like these episodes and you like what we do here, consider supporting us for as little as $1 a month. For $5 a month, you can hear a completely different podcast where we just talk about whatever. This month's podcast, we probably talked for a full 35 minutes about Magic the Gathering decks. So if that sounds fun, do it. Consider supporting us too, because we're going to go to Grand Prix Atlanta in the next couple weeks, and we're going to produce some content around that. So if you want to support any of that stuff, that's expensive. I know that I've spent some dollars on a deck at this point.
Boy, howdy.
You have too. So anyway, we're gonna we'll do a podcast and whatnot about that. Other stuff, you can always listen to Game Study Buddies, the Range Touch podcast about reading academic game studies books and then telling you all about them. That's with me and Michael Lutz. And we got t-shirts coming soon. I keep promising these and saying they're coming out. They are coming out soon. There's just this process of going back and forth with proofs and making sure that they are exactly what we want to be making, but that will be happening soon.
If you don't do that and you order them, the company may well send you a shirt made out of linguine. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but that's not a fun
too much
thing
linguine.
to do.
You can't even eat it
in the winter. In the winter time.
Do that. Too heavy. You want soups. You want light soups. Well, that's the end of episode 55.
Ciao.
In the year of the spirit, a great host will come from the east like a plague of locusts. So saith the wise Alonso.
When the shadows descend upon the lands, our divine Lord will walk alongside us as he walks.